I know that one of them said to me one day, Jennifer, if you don't fit inside a certain box, if you're not a diabetic, if you don't have a heart condition, if you're not obese or you're not this or you're not that, the normal high blood pressure, the normal things, they they don't they don't want to do. It's not that they don't want to deal with it. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem. I think we're stuck in the medical system. We're stuck inside a box, and they're trying to move out, but they're stymied in doing it.
Welcome to The Ownership Game with Gary Montalvo. What would it take to get into the driver's seat of your life and leave your mark? The Ownership Game starts now.
In today's episode, we catch up with an old friend and client, Jennifer Crisp. Jennifer is a retired nurse, a wife, a mother of 3, and a grandmother of 7. We met back around 2015 when she had a holistic nutritional health practice. I was working with her to help her grow her business, and then I quickly became one of her clients when I realized just how brilliant she was. On December 9th, 2020, while just casually doing dishes in her kitchen, she fell and she hit her head, sustaining a traumatic brain injury. Her decades of experience in the medical field could not prepare her for the hurricane of misinformation, misdiagnosis, and just plain lack of resources and research for someone in her situation. When it was clear that the medical establishment that she was a part of for so many years wasn't going to be much help, she had to take matters into her own hands and find alternative treatments and therapies that would eventually help her regain a sense of normalcy in her life. Today, she shares her story with us. I think we must have stopped we think we lost touch around 2016, I feel
Maybe,
like.
yes. It's been a long time. So and then we had that thing called COVID that, just changed everything, right?
Oh, that.
So besides, I know we sort of, I, I think still heard of you now and then. I followed you on Facebook. I saw what you were doing, which was very exciting. Um, so life went on. I had my own business. It was called A Bridge to
Mm-hmm.
Wholeness, and I'm a retired nurse now. And we, my goal was to bring integrative medicine and um, functional medicine doctors together with alternative practitioners to bridge that gap between the Western medicine world and the world of more, I don't want to say woo woo because I don't think it's woo woo, but naturopathic and herbs and oils and good nutrition, all of those things. And I even had my own podcast for a while. However, COVID hit. And when that happened, I'm also a sewist. I have a sewing room with 4 machines set up. um, a, a group of us got together and decided to make masks because in the beginning I knew, being a nurse, that you know the hospitals were not going to take our masks because they were quote unquote not good enough. So we decided to make masks for the nursing homes, the assisted livings, and the homeless shelters. And I knew that sooner or later the hospitals would be asking because they would run out of PPI. So we made over 5,000 masks. We distributed them to the places that we said. Life went on. We knew that sooner or later the companies, the clothing companies, etc., would start producing their own masks, which they did, and the PPI came in. So we timed it very well. Um, And then in December of 2020, December 9th exactly, I was at my kitchen sink, standing there, and my dishwasher was open because I was putting dishes in there. And for some reason, I pushed in the lower rack. And I don't really know why I did that, but I had this little ping of intuition, that little, you get those little hits. And I thought, why did I do that? I heard my washing machine and I turned and forgot the dishwasher was open and I went down. So half of me was on the door and the other half hit the floor. And when I hit the tile floor, my head hit on the right here. But then I jerked back and went down again and hit again and then
Mm.
came back up. And I remember saying on the way down, I tried to grab the wall and I just said, don't hit your head. That's what and of course, as soon as I did it, um, I knew that I had not lost consciousness because being a nurse, you're you're so aware of everything. And I looked very quickly at
Yeah.
my Apple Watch, and there was no gap in time. Um, and I was in a state of shock, and I just said, "OS, this is not good."
Mm-hmm.
So I managed to get myself up. I called my son, who I knew was close by, and said, "You need to come over. I think, I might need some help. I'm not sure." I knew not to be by myself because when you fall and get a
Mm-hmm.
hit to the head, it's best to have people around. He was more worried about my knee than my head because my knee just blew up because I hit the dishwasher so hard, I dented the door. But I'm
Wow.
extremely grateful that I had pushed that bottom rack in because otherwise I would have been impaled. So thank you
Yeah.
to my guardian angels. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so your son comes over, he's
So
worried
he
about your
said, "Mom,"
knee, but
yeah, he said, "You should go to the ER." I said, "I'm not going to the ER. Are you nuts? It's COVID. They're not going to do
uh-huh.
anything for me. I'm going to sit there for hours. They'll give me ice for my knee and ice for my head and send me home." Because, the hospitals were inundated.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. So I iced my head. I had a
So you're
black
feeling fine
eye.
at this point. It sounds like you're feeling fine. It sounds like your knee
Well,
doesn't look great, but you're not really
yeah,
like,
I mean, I wasn't feeling fine. I was obviously
okay.
very shaken and
Mm-hmm.
my head hurt. Then I called my son,
Okay.
the doctor in St. Louis, and said, "Hey, this is what happened." And he said, "Okay." I sent him a picture of my eye. He said, "Okay, it looks like you probably don't have," he was concerned about an orbital fracture. If you fracture the bone around your eye, that can be a real
Mm-hmm.
issue. Um, so life went on. So a couple of days later, I had a meeting, a business meeting on my um, Zoom. And I got everything set up. I sat down, I got on the screen, and then things started to happen. I was having trouble focusing
Mm.
on the screen. I couldn't see correctly. Of course, my neck hurt extremely bad. I mean, I was in a lot of pain. My neck hurt, my chest hurt, my shoulders, my back. I just ached everywhere. And I thought, I can't see. I can't see correctly. So finally, after about 5 minutes, I said, I have to go. I'm I'm not functioning. So I knew to call my husband and I just called him and I said, "You need to come home. I'm in trouble." And he said, "Okay," because I worked from home. So he got
Mm-hmm.
home and we called, I don't remember who we called, but we went to a place called, I don't know, something with concussions. And basically, actually, it's for young athletes who get a
Mm.
concussion. This is COVID, remember? So my
So
husband
it's like
can't
an
come
urgent
in with me.
care for concussions? Is that
Head
kind of what
injuries.
I'm picturing? Okay.
Yes. Yes. I don't remember the name of the place now. Um, so we drove down. It was about 5 p.m. on what, December 11th, week and a half before Christmas. I got in. He couldn't come with me. At this point, Gary, I'm not kidding you when I say I felt drunk. That's the only
Hmm.
way I can describe it, but in the weirdest way because I was out of body. I was floating outside of my own physical being.
Hmm.
And I was having trouble focusing. I could not tolerate lights. I had a very difficult time speaking. I was slurred. That's why I say I sounded like I was drunk. When I got in there, it was a nurse practitioner who came in and I told her what happened. And so she began to give me some tests, which I knew I was going to fail. And she didn't even get to the second test. And she said, "Oh, you have got a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury." And I was like, "No kidding." So
So you
she
feel
said,
pretty confident that you know what's going on at this point. Like you had a feeling you knew what was going on, it sounds like.
yeah, I knew what was happening, but at the same time, I was so disoriented that it was
Right.
very challenging for me to figure out what to do. So they sent me to uh, an online place for concussion patients. And
Hmm.
long story short, I went through that process, but I hate to say this, but it was no help at all. All they were doing was testing my reflexes. And of course, this was all online. And the problem
So
with
wait,
concussion is,
is this after this your visit here or in
yeah,
between? Like so after
this
this
was
visit,
right.
after they said you have a TBI, they sent you to this online place.
Yes, an online place.
Okay.
I looked fine, except for my black eye. I looked fine. And they gave you a battery of tests. Like they'll have you repeat numbers and just all these types of different things. And there's a scale, they measure you. Well, of course, I passed. I passed because that's how I am. I'll push myself to the extreme limit. And
Mhm.
it didn't matter though, because it wasn't any better. So they basically told me,
Mhm.
you will be better in 3 to 6 weeks. And sometimes it can take a little longer. And for some reason, I didn't believe them because this was bad. It was bad. So I then got in
Mhm.
touch with my regular physician and spoke with her. And she said to me, "You do realize that you don't just have a mild concussion, you have a moderately bad concussion. This is not a bump on the head. You don't feel good for a few days, you have a headache, life goes on." No. And let's fast forward another 6 months to a year. I was still out of my body. My average daily routine was to get up around 8 a.m. I had 20 minutes where I felt somewhat normal. And then my whole day just was a disaster. I slept probably 15 to 18 hours a day for a good 6 months.
Mm.
I didn't know where to go to get help, which is why I'm here today, because my goal is to give resources to people so they know where to get help. I went on the advice of the neurologist, the doctors. I went to physical therapy. It was a place where they were supposedly certified to work with concussion patients. And because I couldn't tolerate any light coming in, um, I wore sunglasses, but that didn't always work. So I would ask them to turn the lights off. And their physical therapy consisted of holding a pencil up in front of my face and moving it vertically and horizontally quickly now, by the way, and me trying to follow it, or having me walk and throwing a ball at me and trying to catch it. I had no balance. Um, so after, I think it was the third or fourth visit, I walked in and the lights were on, and I said, "Oh, can we turn the lights off?" And this physical therapist looked at me and said, I can't believe this came out of his mouth. He said, "Well, no, you're just going to have to get over it." But Gary, there is no getting over this, because what had happened was
What?
I had damage to my occipital lobe, which is in the back of the head. Because when I fell, what I learned from my own physician was that I had a coup contra coup concussion, which means that you hit and your brain jostles back and hits the back of your skull and then forward. So you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a diagonal this way. And when I figured that out, it made sense that I was having problem with my vision. So in April of 2021, because I knew so many alternative or outside of the system physicians, I contacted a neuro optometrist, and she's not outside the system. Neuro optometrists are common, but I had actually interviewed her on my podcast, and for some reason, I remembered her. I called, I got an appointment, I went in. She examined me for 2.5 hours. I went through, I don't know how many tests, all types of visual tests. In fact, at one point, I was looking through a scope and I was supposed to read the paragraph. And I couldn't see some of the words. They just weren't there. The words were gone. There were just blank spaces. And I looked up at her and I said, "Dr. Kunkel, there's something wrong with your machine." And she said to me, "Just keep reading." And so I would go back and I would say, the grass green, trees yellow, leaves. They weren't, the words weren't there. Or
Yeah.
I could see an I or a T or an L and I couldn't tell what it was. So the last test she did for me, really, that's when it sunk in. Now you have to remember, I'm a sewer and I quilt. So we like to cut fabric up in little pieces and put them back together. And we cut triangles and squares and rectangles. We do this all the time. So she laid down a square, a rectangle, and a triangle, 3 different colors. And she put them together in a form. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to cover this up. You have the same 3 pieces. And I want you to do the same thing I just did." I could not do it. 3 simple things, I couldn't do it. And that's when I looked up and I said, "This is really bad, isn't it?" And she said, "Yes." So we went a little further.
Mm.
I ended up wearing prism lenses because, unfortunately, when you have whiplash with your concussion, which is what I have, your brain thinks that my midline was to the right. So I keep trying to compensate by bringing my head to the left. So the prism lenses help basically keep my head on straight. Haha.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find out for another year because I didn't know to ask what my score was after I had done all these tests. And she said to me, "Oh, I never told you that." I said, "Well, I don't know whether you did. I don't remember." I passed all those tests with a whopping 33%. That's how bad I was. That's the type of situation I was in. So I did a year and a half of vision therapy. I had to basically learn depth perception again, to focus more clearly. I mean, and vestibular, they worked on my vestibular issues by doing certain exercises. So it was a long haul. And then I also met a chiropractor who specializes in concussion patients. Um, and he worked to realign my spine by adjusting the atlas bone, which sits at the very top of your spine. And I remember the first day I went into him, I we did a series of x-rays, and it was difficult because I couldn't keep my head still. I was like a newborn. My head just flopped all over the place because all my neck muscles had been stretched out. And in that process, after he looked at the x-rays, they're specially trained to look at x-rays differently than a regular doctor. They specialize in orthogonal atlas chiropractic. So they really work on the neck and the spine. Um, he laid me down on a table, and there was a round metal disc, and it had all these degree signs on it. And he said, "Okay, we're gonna reset your atlas." And I said, "Okay." And he brought a machine over, and it had like a little finger on it, and he got me all situated, and it went boop right behind my ear. And I sat up, and my my being came back into my physical body for the first time in a year and a half.
Really?
And I just could not believe it. I just looked at him and I said, "What did you do?" And he said, "Well, I just realigned your spine. I realigned that bone. It sits in a little V right up there. It's that top bone." And I went back to him about once a week for 6 weeks. Um, I eventually got better. The vision started getting better. I could do a little bit more. The fatigue was phenomenal still. And then I met another physician, Dr. William Vickers, here in Annapolis, Maryland. And he is a retired anesthesiologist who had a biking accident and had a pretty good concussion. And he told me in his process of treating me, because we speak a lot um, about all of this and the fact I'm a nurse, etc. And he told me he had gone through 12 neurologists and just could not get the help he needed. So he now runs the Mid-Atlantic Health Institute, and he helps a great number of patients with all kinds of pain management issues. And I had my brain mapped, and I received wonderful treatments that are not in the mainstream, but they are all medical. This is not, woo woo. These are all medical treatments. They're just not as well known. And I received treatments such as IV glutathione and lipids, the lipids to feed my brain, the glutathione to pull out all the toxins. Um, because as he told me, when you have a concussion like this, and that brain, which is, the consistency of butter, right? And it hits that hard skull, it shears the neurons. Your brain is bruised and it has to heal. So the IV, and he said, when that happens, it dumps lots of toxins into your body. And of course, they get stored in your organs. So the glutathione helps to pull all of that out. And then I started
Mm.
receiving pulsed electromagnetic frequency treatments, as well as laser therapy. And laser therapy is light therapy. So I go in and I hold this wand on the front of my head and on the back of my head for 5 minutes each. And then they hook me up to the little pads. And then I received pulsed electrical current into my brain. It's pretty fascinating. And that's 30
The
minutes.
the the thing that I'm just so present to right now though is how this is you as a trained medical professional. And we should just say, like, you're not dropping your resume, but, you just weren't a nurse. Like, you were a boss nurse. Like, you were the nurse that trained other nurses. You were the nurse that
Yes.
ran the show. So, like, you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of training. And this is you trying to navigate this medical system and this doctor trying to navigate going to 12 people. It's shocking to me how, and I've had many guests here who confirm the story, just like how much advocating you have to do for yourself when these types of things happen. But the scary part about it for me is that, not everybody has the medical knowledge that you have, and this is you having to advocate as much as you have to advocate. Like it just kind of feels like people are really I don't know, like I don't want to be doom and gloom, but there's like what like people that don't have this knowledge, what do they do? It's just like
Well, that's part of the reason
so
I'm here.
yeah.
Because
No.
here's the thing. When I went to physical therapy and I tried two different places, and I mean, they meant well, but when I was on the treadmill at the second place, and I said to the young physical therapist there, I said, I'm walking on the treadmill, but I keep falling to the left. I keep hitting the I keep hitting the bars. And of course, walking on the treadmill was very, very difficult. And I wasn't moving fast.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh no, you're fine." I said, "No, I'm not fine." So I said, I keep falling to the left. She said, "Well, let me take a video and look at it." And so she did. She goes, "Oh yeah, you're right. Hello, look at your patient." And then I asked her, I said, I sound like I'm so against physical therapy. I'm not. But this is this is my biggest complaint. If they're dealing with excuse me, young people, a kid who hit their head, something like that, it's okay. But when you're my age, and I'm 64, if you're 40 and over, it it's just because you're old. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's what it is.
Mm.
I asked her, I said, let me ask you, what is the average age of the patients who come in for this kind of rehab? And who is your average patient, men or women? And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, women your age." And I said, "Well, I will tell you, I had gone home after our last visit. And as difficult as it was for me to get on the computer, because it was really, really hard to be on a computer, I researched very carefully what resources were available for people my age who had a fall and a concussion, and what were the treatment options. I came up with absolutely nothing. There is no research on us.
Mm.
There's nothing. It isn't there. I said all the focus is on the young athletes and the professional athletes. And it's great that it's been brought to the everybody's awareness, but the average person walking around like me doesn't get to have available to them the kinds of treatments that these paid athletes get. And I said, and that's really sad. It's very unfortunate. And something has to happen about it. And she just looked at me because she didn't know what to say. And as you well know, Gary, I don't beat around the bush. I just tell it like it is. That's the way I am. So I
One of the
left
things I love
there.
about you.
I left there, and that's when I went to Dr. Kungle, the neuro optometrist, and started seeing Dr. Mark Schwartz in Annapolis, the chiropractor who does the Atlas adjustment, as well as Dr. William Vickers. And here's a funny story. Um, well, it's not particularly funny. So, doctor, not one doctor ever told me that I could not get in a car and drive. No one ever said, don't drive a car. Is that not unbelievable? Here I can't
That
I
is,
can't function.
it's,
I can't see correctly. I can't take information in and process it quickly enough. And nobody said, "Oh, don't drive a car."
mm-hmm.
So of course I was smart enough in the beginning not to drive, but eventually I had to drive because I had to get myself places. So I took a lot of Ubers, which was very expensive. By the way, these treatments,
Yeah.
aside from the neurooptometrists, are not covered by insurance. It's out of
That
pocket.
was one of the questions that I wanted to get into, because I would imagine that that's part of what makes some of these treatments that you're talking about unpopular or not accessible. Is I immediately kind of instinctively knew that they were not covered by insurance.
Yes. So I have to say that both of my physicians, Dr. Vickers and Dr. Schwartz, do not charge excessive amounts of money.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are places that charge thousands of dollars, and I'm just very blessed that they do not, because I think they understand that they need to have these places open for the average person to come in and receive treatment. And I am forever grateful for that. Um, so, if you're in the tri state area, Maryland, DC, Virginia, even Delaware, you can have access to these particular uh, physicians. Um, but even if you don't have or don't know if there are any in your area, I would think that you could still reach out, and you definitely want to look at their websites, which I know are in your links, because you can learn so much. They have the best information in there. And I would even go so far as to contact them to say, who do you know in this area, or who do you recommend? Because I know they're all interconnected. I know they receive extensive training throughout their careers, and they often go to seminars that are 2 and 3 days long to receive more information. They keep up with their training, so they've got people coming in from all over. um, I hope one day that these things are covered, but who knows? I you know
Yeah.
um,
Is that
so
is that
that's
what you
my
think the
story.
source of sorry, is that uh sorry, there's a little bit of a lag in the recording. Is that what you think the source of the lack of resources is? Is it really just like an insurance issue? Like, our insurance doesn't cover this stuff, so it's not available. Like, is the problem rooted? Like, as a medical professional, what do you see as the problems in the system that are causing people to have to advocate so aggressively for themselves?
Well, first of all, I think concussion is grossly overlooked. uh,
Mm,
there are many preconceived ideas that in a certain amount of time you're just going to be better. And yet I know through my own research that that is not true at all, at all. And that many people can walk around for years, I mean years, without getting the kind of help that they need because the physicians are
Mm.
not as trained in that as they should be. I mean, to think that this doctor went through 12 neurologists and just could not get the help that he needed. The research is not there. The research is there for, okay, we know what's going on with the brain. We know how the brain gets damaged, but the brain is very complex. So there's just not the research for these types of treatments to be mainstream. And I don't really know why that is, except that, in my previous life as this, very holistic, integrative nurse, working and speaking with all of these different practitioners, I know that one of them said to me one day, Jennifer, if you don't fit inside a certain box, if you're not a diabetic, if you don't have a heart condition, if you're not obese or you're not this or you're not that, the normal high blood pressure, the normal things, they they don't they don't want to do. It's not that they don't want to deal with it. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem. I think we're stuck in the medical system. We're stuck inside a box and they're trying to move out, but they're stymied in doing it. And I know there's a lot in cancer research where they're making a lot of developments in certain areas, but I think the regular family physician is stuck. I think they're stuck. That's
Yeah.
that's my opinion, and it's a
Yeah, I
shame.
mean, my experience in people sharing the stories is that if anything is out of the ordinary, they don't know how to handle it. Like if anything requires any type of, it doesn't fit into the box, they just, they chuck it up to stress, they chuck it up to age, they chuck it up to a psychological problem. And, maybe they'll give you a
Yes,
pill and send you home.
yes. And I did have one neurologist, and all they wanted to do was just put me on gabapentin, which is it's for neuropathy. It's used for brain seizures, all kinds of things. I did go in and get an EEG, and it showed nothing. Um, and I kept saying to her, but if you give me gabapentin and I take this, how am I going to know if I'm getting better or is it just the medication that's working? Because that doesn't help me any. I have to get better from the root cause up. I can't just have a band aid put on this. That's not how I am. I've never been that way. So, uh, uh, I did things that were not normal for treatment. I had acupuncture. I had a lot of acupuncture, a lot.
Mm.
Um, and then, of course, the laser therapy, the IV glutathione, the pulsed electromagnetic frequency treatments. I also stayed in touch with my own naturopath and my own regular Western medicine physician. Um, I had all the neuro optometry, all of that therapy. I also did, and want to give a really big shout out to one of my dearest friends who is a Qigong master. I know you know him, Richard Bradison.
Hmm.
And I called him about 6 months after I fell, and I said, Richard, I really want to learn Qigong. I know that it's going to help me with my therapy. And he actually came to the house because he only lives 15 minutes from me. And
Mm.
Qigong is an ancient Chinese practice that is similar to Tai Chi, but it's not a defensive form. And it's very gentle. You can do it sitting or standing. And I knew that I needed movement because I was so physically debilitated from the fall. And that was the beginning of my movement. So he was coming once a week for me. And I can't tell you how much that has helped. So, aside from the things that you need to do with your physicians, having a practice like Qigong or any type of very slow, gentle movement is a really, really good idea. When lots of times when you have a concussion, you also get whiplash, which is what I had. And the whiplash, believe it or not, can cause even more issues sometimes than the concussion. Because when that spine, when that atlas is not aligned, that cerebrospinal fluid is blocked. It's not flowing like it should into the brain. And that's what sets you up for that, those headaches and that feeling of my head just like going to explode off of my shoulders, and the headaches and the vision issues and the just there's so much that happens to your
Hmm.
physical body, but at the same time you can't always figure it out. So it's called dysautonomia. That's the term for it, because your central nervous system and your autonomic nervous system, they're out of whack. They're just out of whack. And it affects everything. I my swallowing was affected, my breathing, my digestive system wasn't working properly. Of course, my sleep was greatly affected. So having the right people, the right healthcare team for you is vitally important. And what I also want to say is, wow, you really have to advocate above and beyond. And I say this because after the bruises are gone, you look fine. You look okay.
Hmm.
And you sometimes don't speak up about how you are feeling physically or emotionally, mentally. And so you kind of, you hide inside yourself. You must speak up. And that's one lesson that I have learned, is to really speak up for myself. And I have created self-care boundaries that I will not cross. I will not. So if I am very active for 3 or 4 days, still, I will have a day where I'll wake up and I know that it is a day of rest. There is no getting around it, because some of the symptoms never completely go away. Um, and I will say this, and most people don't know this: when you have a concussion, if you have had more than one concussion in your life, say you get to the third one, this is where you can start to have more issues because it's a buildup. So it's not like, it's one fall and okay. This is probably my fourth or fifth concussion. This just happened to be the worst
Okay.
one. So I'd like people to keep that in mind, especially if you have kids who are in sports. Um, it's not just one hit. It's if they get hit multiple times. We know this now, right, through research with all the athletes. We see the CTE, the severe concussions, etc. Unless, of course, you're in a severe accident, like a car accident, can do a lot of damage. Um, but I think it's frustrating that it took me a year or more to really get the help I needed. I think it's
Mm.
amazing with the background that I have and the knowledge that I have, but it was hard for me to
Yeah,
think.
yeah. No, I get it.
So,
Well, I just really appreciate you coming here and sharing your story. And, I love your message about advocating because, I mean, I feel like in life in general, sometimes we're afraid to speak up. I come from a background where doctors are revered. And so you just trust them, you just trust, oh, well, they said this must be the case. They're the professional, right? And not that you can't trust them. I'm not, I don't think the point is that anyone is trying to trash talk doctors or medical professionals. That's not the point. But, there is a training, there is a philosophy, there is a system, there is a machine in place that doesn't always
yes.
um take care of people, right? So we need to do our own advocating and get an ownership of our health and getting ownership of what we need, and our experience, because sometimes we doubt ourselves, right? Sometimes I'm like, oh, I must be crazy, or oh, I don't, it's like, no,
Oh,
trust
yes.
yourself. Like, really, if it's there for you, it's for a reason. As we wrap up, my love, how are you? How is your health now? How's life for you now?
So much better. So much better. I mean, I am actually teaching handbag making now. I would say I'm 90%. I have days, sometimes it's a little weird. Right now I know that my neck is out, and so I go to see the chiropractor on Thursday. Uh, and the reason I know it's out is because when I'm driving, believe it or not, this is when it really comes to me. I'll go to an exit and I'm like, is this the right exit? Now, I've been driving here for, I don't know, 40 years, So when little things like that happen, I have to stop and say, okay, something's not right. I need to go back and get
Mm,
treatment. But I'm going to leave you with a couple of really funny things because I had to keep my sense
okay.
of humor through this entire thing. I mean, I really did. So, um, couple things. I would, go to brush my teeth and I'd put toothpaste on the toothbrush. And then 2 hours later, I'd go back in the bathroom and there was the toothbrush with the toothpaste. And I would look at it and I'd say, how did that get there? I don't understand. I brushed my teeth. Did I brush my teeth? Well, I must not have brushed my teeth because I don't understand why the toothbrush is still there, right? And I would have these discussions with myself, and nobody was here because my husband was working. And then I would, I'll never forget the day my husband and I went out to lunch. This was only about maybe a year and a half ago, because I'm coming on, it'll be 4 years in December. And we ordered crab cakes. And so the waitress comes over and she looks at me and she says, do you want tartar sauce or cocktail sauce? And the first things that came into my head were red and white, not what was tartar sauce, just red and white.
Uh-huh.
And I said, red and white. And I turned to my husband and I said, what do I get? Do I get tartar sauce or cocktail sauce? And he says, you always get tartar sauce. And I said, oh, that's right. Tartar sauce is white and cocktail sauce is red. The waitress is just looking at me like, what is wrong with you, woman? I was so proud of myself because I figured that out. I mean, these are the things that happen. And you're just like, how is this possible? Or I would get in the car. I remember I got in the car one day and I was driving to the doctor's office and it was raining. And I could not figure out how to work those windshield wipers. So I'm driving down the highway and I'm manually doing the windshield wipers. And I got to the office and I just said, the doctor comes out and he looks at me and says, you don't look very good, Jennifer. And I said, I broke into tears and I said, I can't figure out how to use my windshield wipers. I know this is, but then you have to laugh about it because it's like the most common, normal, ordinary things were just not present in my life. So I just, you have to have a sense of humor. You really do. I had to get through all of this.
Oh my goodness.
So
That is hilarious. Well, friend, I appreciate you coming to the show, and I know that you wanting to tell your story just was really rooted in trying to support people who might have a similar journey and inspiring them and giving them some resources. So I just appreciate your heart and wanting to do that. And I'm so glad that you're better and okay and just so on a personal note, just, that so happy that you're healthy and doing well and that you are, enjoying your life and your new business and you're
yes.
making handbags. We should share the link with people as well so they can check out your beautiful bags.
Well, I haven't even done that yet. So that's part of my next process, but I have to take things one step at a
Okay.
time. I can't
Yeah,
do it all anymore. It's like, okay, step one. Oh, step two. Oh,
I
look, there's a
get it.
step three. So, but I love teaching, and it's my it really is my birth. Uh, what do I want to say? It's the reason I'm here is to
Yeah,
educate.
yeah,
That's the reason I'm here. Yeah, have somebody check those links out for you. If you're not able to do it, have them do it for you. Okay, that's super important. So I so appreciate this time that you have given me to speak about this, and I send out all my good energy to all those people who are suffering with this, and hope and pray that they are able to get the help that they need. So thank you so much.
amen. All right, Jennifer, thank you for being here in the show. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Navigating medical decisions can often feel overwhelming and confusing. But it's scary to me that someone with Jennifer's experience had to work that hard to navigate this, and eventually just had to create her own treatment plan. What about the rest of us who don't have medical degrees or experience to break down research or to just know when something doesn't sound right? How many people are just living in pain because they don't know better, haven't been listened to, or just don't have the right insurance? I personally find all this terrifying. And not just for me, for my parents who are starting to age and I need to start being more involved. The lesson for me here is to not be afraid to advocate for yourself or your loved ones. Ask all the questions that you need to ask. Get second, third, and fourth opinions if that's what it takes. If you're not getting what you need, there are other options out there. And there are people like Jennifer who are willing to share their experiences, their resources, so that others can benefit. Just because someone with a fancy degree is saying it, it doesn't mean it's the whole story. And I'm not saying this to speak crap about doctors. They're just one part of an ecosystem that has a great deal of problems. And until it gets reinvented, you gotta keep your eye on the ball. And you gotta do your homework. I want to give a special thanks to my guest, Jennifer Crisp, who just wanted to come on here and share her story. This is not her business. She gets no benefit from this. She just wanted to make sure that others knew that they had options if they were ever in this situation. So I'm really thankful for her to care that much about that. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with 2 or 3 people who you think could benefit from this message. As always, thank you so much for your time, and I will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Ownership Game with your host, Gary Montalvo. Make sure to like and comment on your favorite podcast platform, as well as subscribe so that you never miss an episode.